Wait a minute, you're surprised by the lack of ability to contextualize history among the populace with the education system that we have? Come on.
I actually did see a Bernie Sanders rally in 360 video up on YouTube somewhere. It's already happening.
Somebody tell CNN or whoever it is that's doing the Democratic debate they're not the first.
What? We're not the first?
What?
Hi, I'm Luann Phillips, and my avatar in Second Life and other virtual worlds is Think a Little.
I'm Joyce Betancourt, Rhiannon Chat Noir in Second Life.
And you're listening to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley.
Hello there and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. My name is Draxter Dupre. Joe Yardley is off today. We have a show that focuses on Oculus Connect, the second annual Oculus Developers Conference that wrapped up on last Friday in Hollywood, the entertainment capital, at the Loews Hollywood Hotel. We have today two guests. We have Luann Phillips, an educational technology consultant. You may know her as Think a Little in Second Life. She works with E-Extension Foundation and educators from all around the world, and also USDA New Technologies for extension education. They've been working in Second Life and Open Simulator for a long time. Also on the show, Joyce Betancourt, co-founder of Avacon. They put on conferences on Second Life and virtual reality. She's a graphic designer. She's an evangelist. She runs the nonprofit Commons in Second Life. So they were both on the ground. Joyce interviewed John Carmack from Oculus. Joyce had a selfie done with Oculus co-founder Palma Luckey. And she used those 3 minutes to ask Palma some critical questions, which I find rather cool. So that's the special show today. No other news. You know where to get your news. We have excellent blogs out there about Second Life. There's excellent blogs on virtual reality. And just before we go to the interview, I apologize for the sound. I'm still sort of in a makeshift office. We've been moving. I'm not going to tell you where we moved to in the physical world. I live in the virtual world, and you know that, and you can meet me there. No need to get all big data on me now, dear listener. Don't you track me down. Analyze the reflections of the room and the absorption coefficient, and then deduct from that where I am in the physical world. No. You can, of course, support this show by taking out a subscription. Please do. And let's go straight to Joyce Betancourt, a.k.a. Rhiannon Chat Noir in Second Life, setting the scene for us. How was it down at the Loews Hotel? There were 1,500 people, right, Joyce?
Yes, 1,500 people. It was held in Hollywood, California. So a kind of a very celebrity-laden, entertainment-laden space already.
The entertainment capital of the world, until, of course, VR is going to destroy them, I suppose.
Yeah, though I think the event, they were definitely embracing that, all the food was very kind of like kitschy kind of gourmet meets high-end programmer snacks, entertainment food, right? They had even kind of the furniture brought in, so lots of, beautiful white leather and nice bluey, purpley LEDs to make it look very space age.
Jesus Christ. I mean, that's the Facebook money right there.
Swanky sort of digs around us. Even I think Wolfgang Puck was catering some things. I heard some of the people over talking that.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I saw at Joyce, I saw Twinkies. I don't think they were from Wolfgang Puck.
They were Wolfgang Puck approved.
Yeah. They also had the venerable chocolate bacon there for us to try. Yeah.
You guys got a Samsung Gear VR and a game controller in your gift bag.
Yeah, it was a very Oprah moment, certainly, and you get a Gear VR and you get a Gear VR. So, yes, the Gear VR, of course, you need a Samsung 6 phone of some sort or a tablet or their pad.
Which you didn't get.
No, we didn't get that.
So it's like the drug dealer. He's just going to give you like a little kind of bag of weed, but you got to buy the bong yourself, I guess.
Exactly. You need a Galaxy S6 phone. That's the only one that works with the model they gave us. So
it is. There's a catch to everything. At least Oprah gives you the keys and the car. But so this is a really big event, and so Luann, you went there. What was your sense of? Because on the podcast we often talk about VHS versus Beta wars or Beta. I'm sorry, I mispronounced it in the olden days. And I guess Oculus is really pushing pedal to the metal to try to be sort of the standard in the HMD world. Have they won already without the war even starting between whatever PlayStation VR and the others?
Or HTC or one of those? Yeah. Well, they don't. They really don't speak of those things. Just like they don't really speak of Second Life ever. They're very focused on their own business plan and meeting their objectives on the timeline that they've set. And they seem to be getting very close. Their demos were very impressive. They're on this first quarter 2016 deadline, and it looks like they're going to meet it. Someone, I can't remember who it was, said there's no shortage of low-hanging fruit in the VR world at this point in time. So everybody's out to grab that low-hanging fruit, get their thing to market, and make some money. You can tell it's all very focused on the money. That was the impression I got. So we'll see who gets to the finish line first, and after that, who gets to the finish line best.
Okay, so Samsung Gear VR is coming out Black Friday in the US for $99. They announced a whole bunch of other things, including a virtual app store, the arcade where they partner with Sega to bring back. You can play Pac-Man in VR, for instance.
I think a lot of those announcements are certainly, as we were going back to before, very entertainment focused, right? So even Netflix. That you can take advantage of now too, like, kind of collectively watching movies and Netflix together in VR. And then they're also kind of pushing that to the kind of gamer culture, watching your friends play by doing Twitch TV. So just think, Drax, you too can kind of do sort of a live stream of your podcast and have people in VR watch it. I mean,
that was my sense as well. And the announcements in that regard were focused on, if you will, passive entertainment. You're sitting there, you're watching Netflix in VR, you stream, you watch other people's streams, and you consume content with two TVs glued to your head.
The TV on your head and the TV in front of you, yes.
But then, Luann, there's also Oculus Medium. Did you guys try this at all, where you paint and sculpt in virtual reality?
Well, let me just first say that the difference really between the Gear VR and the Oculus is the interactivity or lack thereof. So with the Gear VR, you're really going to have passive experiences like watching Netflix, whereas the emphasis with the Oculus headset is what you can do in the virtual space. And yes, Medium is one of them. I did not do very well with that demo. It was hard for me. I'm not an artist and I'm kind of clumsy, but that's a wonderful functionality. The one that really grabbed me, though, was Toybox. And thank you, Joyce, for insisting that I try Toybox. She took me over there and guarded my dessert so that I could go in and try Toybox. And Toybox was an interactive experience with another individual in the space. I'm not sure if it has to be, and you appear as these ghostly masks to each other with hands. And in the Toybox demo, you can actually, with their new interactive hand things. What are they called? Joyce, help me out. Touch. Yeah, touch. The touch controllers, those little ring things, they're really pretty intuitive to use. So you put those on and you at a table with objects that you can pick up, throw a boomerang, it comes back. You can catch it, stack up blocks, use a slingshot. Pick up a puppet and move its mouth. It was just amazing. And open a lighter and light fireworks and shoot them off. It was incredibly interactive. I completely immersed. I had no sense of being anywhere other than in that activity. It was just astounding. These interactive applications are going to be the killers, I think, that people are going to want to get in there and use and enjoy. And so what's going to happen, the Gear VR will come out. Will the public understand what that is, jump in, get it, spend the money? Then, months later, Oculus Rift comes out and, I see now this better thing is available and I can interact. I want that too. I need a better computer to be able to use the Oculus Rift headset. So I see some people into this for a couple grand by March because, there are a lot of things out there to do enjoy. Now that the other thing is the Henry demo that we did, which is more like being in the middle of a cartoon, was not interactive at all. And so the movie-like experiences at this point don't look like they'll be interactive yet. But that again was a very compelling sense of presence. So I'll be in it for 2000 by March. Absolutely.
And they're partnering with people like, Dell and Alienware and all that to already tailor systems for it. So,
oh yes, they're going to have a logo on Oculus compatible desktop systems, so that when you buy that it is compatible with Oculus Rift.
A big money-making operation with everything rolled in, several different levels of involvement. Whatever dough you have, they take your dough, and you get the level, and it's open to developers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're just talking about the hardware at this point too. Think of all the money to be made with the content as well. And I think that impressed me the most is that we had 1,500 people there. I'm not a content developer at that level. I'm a Second Life content developer, Open Simulator. But the people who are there, the hardcore programmers, they are looking to make big money on the first in with good content at some levels, indie people as well as movie studios. So this is a lot like the early web, where the door was open to making money and people were charging for it.
But the thing is, then again, this goes back to my earlier thought that it's tied to this platform. And of course, they have a lot of money also to put into marketing. They can put on an event like this, a posh event, as the British would say, and then your content might be tied to this platform. PlayStation VR, formerly Morpheus, Sony has PlayStations, I don't know how many millions in households, so they have a certain market power. But everybody tells me that HTC Vive at this point is actually the superior headset. I guess the future will tell us if they're going to be able to rally around developers around their platform. It's my understanding it's going to be very different to develop for different platforms, so they're not necessarily compatible, the content. I don't know how easy it will be to port content to another platform.
Yeah, in chatting with some of the indie developers there, I think, you definitely have a lot of people who are experimenting. Most of them, they're either working in, say, something like 360 video, right, which, that's sort of one half of the equation of people creating content, or they're working in something like Unreal Engine or Unity, and they're kind of porting out from there. And yes, you have the big, you have the sort of big beasts on the scene, like there were executives from Disney and stuff there too, right? So there are folks on the large
20th
level.
Century Fox, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So, but I think on the indie level, I think there's a lot of people that I think are trying to be kind of lean to that. Like I met a few people who had already had prototypes and stuff out for HTC, the Vive, and we're now kind of also sort of sorting stuff for Oculus too. So
maybe it is not that difficult. That's something that I cannot, also not being a developer, I cannot really evaluate. I did download the Unreal Engine this morning to start playing around. Let's see how far I get beyond a blank space with a cube in the middle that I can walk around.
And to more easily kind of ramp up people, though, I guess we'll see how it is. I didn't get a chance to play with it, but I saw him demo it. John Carmack, who's kind of like, the forefather of 3D gaming from things like Doom and stuff. He's their Oculus's CTO, right? He created for his own uses, but then is releasing it, this whole VR script, which is supposed to make it, instead of loading something like Unity or Unreal and having to kind of go through all that complexity in order to be able to output, sort of a more simple Oculus kind of content experience, like a 360 video thing or some kind of more simpler, VR, you're in a 360 environment and you're just in there chatting as an avatar or something. This VR script is supposed to allow you to kind of, sort of code on a level that you're accessing the native Oculus functions, but not having to worry about going deep into Unity. So that'll be released too. And, once that's like finished up, I guess, soon.
And that kind of brings us back to the idea of user-generated content and how important will that be, both for video and for computer-generated experiences. And yes, I watched John Carmack actually coding to his phone, and creating a small demo. It was not a complicated thing, but you still need to know how to code to do that. The video, however, I think there will be many opportunities for user-generated content in 360 video early on. However, you can view that stuff on Google Cardboard as well. So whether you don't really need Oculus to do that. So it'll be interesting to see where the consumer pays attention. We know user-generated content is a big thing. People want to put their videos up on YouTube, but it's also virtual worlds like Second Life have survived, I think, this long on the opportunity to create your own content
Yeah,
easily.
they democratize content. I mean, that's to me, that's my big thing that is so important, the democratization aspect. Now, before we move on to metaverse and other, there's so many things to talk about. I want to get Joyce's feedback on the toy box thing, and specifically, why does the toy box demo work? What is specific for VR? Everybody talks about, oh, you have to create content for VR. What does that mean? I mean, in your mind, vis-a-vis creating content for, let's say, a virtual world.
Toy box, yeah. I mean, I definitely think it's amazing, which is why I pushed for her to definitely try it. Like,
give up my dessert and go play.
I know. Go leave your cake. But I think the way they demoed Toy Box, as she alluded to, was amazing. The fact that they actually had another person in there, kind of facilitating and walking you through the presentation, through the kind of the interactions. So you were in one room and they were in another room somewhere. You didn't even know who where this other person is, who they were. So done in sort of this, kind of true multiplayer or way where it didn't really matter where they were, and they talked you through that. The touch itself, I mean, you kind of in essence really just have like three input places. You kind of your thumb and your pointy forefinger, and then the other three fingers kind of open and grasp things, But even just with those three kind of places of control, as Luann was saying, it allows you to kind of pick up things and touch things and even interact with the other person and poke things, and and then that same stuff is transcended into like the medium and being able to like do more complex things like building and sculpting, right? Mm-hmm. So I think those are compelling because they're definitely, especially to those who might not be as game focused, which is a bigger percentage of the population, especially if you go into kind of those that haven't grown up as a digital native, right? I think this is a much kind of easier, compelling use of Oculus, that you can kind of meet and play with people or interact and that kind of thing. And I think those sort of things, especially through things like Medium, are kind of a gateway to making people create content, and I think whether we're talking YouTube and user-generated content there, or this Oculus thing, or even what we do in Second Life, I think there's a bit of that sort of magic thing that engages folks. I think there's a lot of people who have latent creativity that probably squashed it in the school system somewhere, that this kind of appeals to. So I think that's a place that I think they're definitely trying to tap into, which is, I think, a smart move, right?
Well, that's about user-created content, but I meant also specifically the Toy Box demo. I mean, you hinted at it. It's with another person. So there's this social component, is why it's so immersive, why it draws you in. But what are the other things that need to be sort of in place to make it a successful experience with the goggles on, versus just being in front of having the screen between you and the content? Yeah,
definitely that other person there, I think, was a key point of it, because they had other touch demos that were more just going through the games that were kind of listening to either the interface if there were prompts, or dealing with that weren't quite as engaging. They could be fun at points, but I think the social aspect is an important part to it, and they're also wrapping that into other things. Though to earlier, it's a lot of the other stuff are more kind of passive social activities while doing some passive thing like watching movies. Whereas at the touch, you're kind of interacting and creating and playing together. Granted, Medium was more the creation thing. The toy box demo was much more, kind of play, like collaborative play,
I guess my question is twofold. Maybe, Luann, you want to jump in? So the one thing is always, why do I need goggles strapped to my face to enjoy it? But the other thing is, if I design for the TV strapped to my face, what do I need to pay attention to in order to make it work?
Specifically to Toy Box, I'm not sure how difficult it is to create content where you can interact at that level. The other demos with touch that Joyce mentioned, like I Expect You to Die from Shell Games or Bullet Train, I forget who made that one. You see your hands in front of you, and there's certain things, objects you can pick up and use, kind of like in some kind of a quest game where there's a thing, oh, look, there's a gun, I can pick it up and use it. But Toy Box was how can I say this? It was like playing with another person. I'm not sure it has to be social, though. I think you can probably do Toy Box alone. And so it's not even the social thing that's so compelling. It's that you're really able to pick up multiple kinds of things in the space in a way that doesn't feel at all like a flat video game. You're really in there. There was shooting involved too, I have to say. In addition to throwing and catching and puppets and all that, there was a shooting gallery where you could shoot giant urns and big garden gnomes, and they would blow up around you. And the pieces would fall around you. It was extremely immersive in a way that I had never experienced before. Another thing I wanted to mention about Medium too that we didn't touch on that I found out is that those things you create in Medium, your little people that you create with the material they provide, can be exported as a 3D file and then used in 3D printing. So the maker movement might really be interested in that aspect of creation, especially people who really don't understand how to use a 3D modeling program. It's a big learning curve for that.
I've seen somewhere somebody posted, this is the death of Maya. I mean, Maya is obviously quite complex. Some say Blender is even more complex. I'm very proud to also have designed a cube in Blender. Oh, wait a minute, it just comes up when I start the program. So anyway, these are very powerful, complex programs that obviously work in a very technical sense, but not in a very intuitive sense. And when I saw the Medium demo just on the Twitch stream from Oculus Connect, it's a no-brainer. That's how you work with clay. When you have clay, that's how you work with sand. You pour water on sand on the beach, and then you build a sand castle. That's how you do it.
All you can make is organic shapes, but I did also find out that there will be features coming on before the release to the public that allow you to make straight edges, so you can make things more with guides to create shapes rather than those free-flowing things that look kind of like you played with your food or whatever. Yeah.
You guys hinted at the other demos, so just to clarify for our listeners, that was there an exhibition floor?
What they really did for the Oculus demos was build individual little living rooms that you went into to try things like Toy Box. You went in there and there was furniture and plants, carpet that they brought in. On the plane going home, someone told me that this is their standard setup that they use at trade shows too. So I don't know if like South by Southwest or something like that, they do the same thing. They've got moving vans that carry the stuff around, the white furniture for the lobby, the carpet, everything. It took them more than a day with an army of workers to deconstruct the whole thing. I watched some of that process. It's a big investment. And that's the money, the power of Facebook, I think, to support that kind of exhibit. Now, your indie developers, there was a lot of that going on around the public spaces and certainly in the hotel rooms. But sitting on the floor with your laptop and the other person with the TV strapped to their head like that.
As Luann was saying, it was more informal, right? So you had people in the mezzanine, which is where the big kind of lounge of stuff was, where people would be sort of setting up or walking around with their Gear VR and like their mobile phones and like, hey, can you try this for me? So there was that, but it was less the trade show, outside of these kind of big curated experiences. Not so much on the indie level, but I think there was one sort of the Samsung had their own kind of lounge, which sort of stood out to me, and it was like they called it the Samsung Gear VR Lounge, of course. And you walked in, and again, more white furniture and sci-fi blue LED lighting, and they had a cappuccino espresso bar in there, and then it was just a room full of people wearing Gear VRs on very swanky furniture. It looked like some very like dystopian future cafe. Extremely quiet, like the quietest like cafe setting you could possibly, because everybody was just like paying attention to what was going on in their Gear VR. So
this is like Ready Player One. I always forget what these cafes are called, but he checks into some of those like cafes along the way. You remember?
Yeah,
so I
we
know,
got autographed copies of Ready Player One as part of our swag as well.
Yeah, that was part of the initial swag bag. Was Ready Player One. So obviously they're making that connection point too. Though it's interesting they kind of pick that because it does have some dystopian sort of tones to it.
I think listeners know that I am of the persuasion that sometimes what scares me a little bit is that some of the Silicon Valley tech people are a little bit too comfortable with dystopian futures and don't see them as dystopian as I do personally. I mean, there's a fine line between where this could go and could go both ways.
Yeah,
I don't remember who it was that said, but one presenter said that it's an escapist medium, that people go to virtual reality to escape their pitiful lives, their sad existence, and go to something better. And that language all sounded a lot like the dystopian future kind of mindset, that we're headed down a slippery slope where everybody will end up unhappy and the only alternative will be the metaverse.
And that sort of says nothing to even the escapist part of it if it's just you're giving them a panacea, right? Like, here's some VR. This will make you feel like your life is a little better.
That's right. And while the world goes to shits and people are disengaged.
In the very first night, so Luann and I were both kind of lucky to be there through the Women in VR group, which is something we should mention as well. But the very first day that we were there, which was the day before the first conference, actually before the conference officially kicked off, there was a community kind of meetup, that Oculus put on for a certain subset of the attendees that I think were more community focused. Or
the diversity luncheon, it was called.
Oh no, that was later. That was actually the next day.
Oh, that's right. There was a luncheon. That's right, and there was a meetup as well. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So the meetup was a little bit more generalized. So you had, you had like Reverend Kyle from a lot of the podcasters and bloggers, and you had some other folks there as well, right? So it was a more, I think, their community and kind of grassroots and some of their PR, so we were both at that, and and Palmer was actually there doing his photo ops, right? And I took it, I kind of got in line to do that and took it upon myself for that like 5 minutes or so to make it a conversation with, Palmer about this whole bigger, broader social good.
So you actually really asked him, does he see what future does he see? Is he not scared of the possibilities that might happen, the bad ones?
It was similar to sort of what you kind of said now. Like, obviously he's talking about, like, he referenced the idea that the power to kind of be able to, like, reach everyone. And of course, in my world, I take that as, meaning regardless of geography or ability or accessibility.
Socioeconomic status, and actually also the empowering aspect vis-a-vis just, checking out and making your miserable life a little bit more comfortable by consuming passive content.
We're both very familiar with, like, say, the work that Virtual Ability does or things like that in virtual. Right? And there's amazing things that can be done with these spaces that are more than just, looking at something pretty to avoid something you don't want to look at or something, right? So he kind of brought that up, and I mentioned my comment about the geography and ability and that kind of thing, and then he chimed back in with what you had sort of the kind of a continuation of that sort of thing, that he does believe that costs or they're going to work to bring costs down so it's more universally kind of available. So that still doesn't necessarily, it still speaks to them thinking market penetration and not necessarily, social good. But I mean, he did seem optimistic. And we were talking about, I brought up the whole, VR being such an, seen as being such an empathy machine, right? The idea that just as sort of taking the virtual worlds angle. And
yeah, and I guess, it really depends how you use it. There's Noni de la Peña uses it for the empathy angle, if you will, and so that argument can be made. I'm not going to bore listeners with going back to my broken record theme of. Sometimes I have Facebook interactions with Mr. Lucky that are a little bit scaring. People who are my Facebook friends, they can look at those interactions and draw their own conclusions about where we stand on certain important social political issues.
Now you can have those Facebook social things in immersive video.
Isn't that awesome? And I'm also not going into the fact that, yes, of course, the content will be manifold and hopefully very diverse, and people are going to be engaged and enabled. But nonetheless, if it's tied to the Facebook machine, well, we talk about this almost every week in some sort of fashion. Then I would be a little bit concerned that there's going to be a certain control over. Just with Apple, as an Apple user, I'm not an Apple fan of their philosophy of having sort of that closed system. But anyway, that's a big subject. Luann, you have been evangelizing virtual worlds, the usage of digital worlds. Now, how does this make it easier, the advent of VR? Tell me specifically how you would sort of work with the people you work with, trying to encourage them to use this technology in an educational situation. What's your pitch?
Well, it's all on me, I think, because I tried to talk with some of the Oculus management about educational use.
Right, and they go like, we don't care, there's no money in it.
There's no money in it, right, exactly. It's all the profit motive right now. And so funding these kinds of experiences at a level that's compelling is going to be difficult. I'm very much looking forward to being able to use the Oculus in Second Life or virtual worlds to come, Open Simulator as well. But I'm not so sure who's going to propel that forward in a good enough way that it will be able to go up against some of these high-end, expensive VR solutions that are being developed. So how can, if we have okay content versus 20th Century Fox content out there, how will people react when we bring them to an educational world and it still looks substandard to the video game quality? So I'm not sure.
Terrible situation that there is enthusiastic educators, and it's hard. Sometimes in Second Life it was, and it is. It's probably harder now because the content creators are busy and with their thing, and if an enthusiastic educator might not get the building expertise to build the content to engage students.
Oh yeah, and the cost of this new kind of VR content is huge, and it involves teams of people creating a 15 or 20-minute experience over 6 months. They said the 6-month window to create it, team of maybe 20 people working on it, and a cost of
development.
Possibly millions. It's game development to get the quality of content that will be out there for the consumer. So I'm not sure where education will really fit in, but my sense is that the video content, the 360-degree immersive video content, will be the sweet spot for education. And so that's where I'm focusing. What we're looking at doing is finding the best camera rig we can at a price that educators can afford. So there's some coming out in the under $1,000 price range that are good enough, and then they can go out there and use that camera to get into the field and do demonstrations and experiences at that level that can be viewed on a cardboard. So for example, our Master Gardener program, which some people may be familiar with across the country, they're interested in using it to get out into a garden space and have people feel like they're standing in the middle of the space while the educator is teaching, and then they can give their students a Google Cardboard to consume the content later. So I think that's where we're going to actually focus.
I'm actually just looking up 360 Heroes. I'm on their mailing list. There's a GoPro rig starting at $600 for a 360 GoPro rig, where you can do immersive video in the quote unquote real world. But so what you're saying here, Luann, this is actually really a concern that I also have. That again, we're in a way we're moving possibly slightly backwards, because Second Life and then OpenSim by extension have really opened up these tools to bring people to the table. What do you think needs to happen? And Joyce, also please chime in, to make this VR creation now also accessible to people with not that much money. I mean, I could argue the Unreal Engine is free, Unity is free. We'll see what Linden Lab is building with Project Sandstorm. Maybe it's just around the corner that we also can create content without a big team, or take it where you want.
Of course, in the now, I mean, we even have Open Simulator in Second Life, right? Like, we can create VR content now. I mean, I don't think, I think there's not a lot of knowledge outside of our circles beyond that, it seems, right? Like, so maybe a little bit better PR in regards to, like, hey, have an Oculus and, want to experience 3D content and
social 3D content is the key
social
there,
3D.
right?
Yeah, in a an immersive VR environment that is already kind of available, right? So I mean, I think there's some of that could be done a better job with, and I'm surprised even maybe because it's still sort of in beta with Linden Lab that they haven't pushed that more so.
As much as I love as much as I love the experience, I mean, in reality, you do need those consistent frame rates or you get sick very fast. That's the biggest problem with Second Life. If you build something extremely efficient, you might get very consistent frame rates, but there's not a guarantee. So I completely understand, why they are very reluctant to promote it more heavily, because the backlash could be huge. Someone goes into a sim that is pretty laggy, and you're going to start throwing up pretty quickly.
Yeah, you are, and they can't control what the user does. So that even if they label locations in Second Life that are optimized for the Oculus Rift, that doesn't prevent people from wandering beyond there. And they don't want to be responsible for puking. No, that's no. Come in, try this, and you threw up. It's just really not a good marketing strategy at all.
That lends a whole huge thing about even back to that sort of designing and making these spaces. Like, that's, between the needing to figure out how you handle user interface in a world that, is immersive, to this, designing experiences that are not, not going to cause discomfort in these ways. Like, that kind of lends another level of complexity in regards to designing these spaces, just that she was. Oh, go on. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, and there hasn't really been a lot of research, as I can see, into the physical effects. And so I'm looking at a liability situation here where people with seizures, epilepsy, things like that, how do you protect them from getting into these spaces? There's a big liability situation looming, I think. And I'm not sure how they're dealing with that. Nobody talks about it.
They don't want to talk about virtual pornography, and they don't want to talk about liability.
Well, let's talk about virtual pornography.
That's another show.
Yeah,
there were some representatives of that there.
Absolutely, and I made friends with my first porn star, and
Ella?
Yes, and I looked her up on the internet, and golly, I saw all of her. She's there, and she's going to make money because the early days of the web, who led some of the most cutting edge content, the video introduction of video on the web. It was the porn industry. Same thing's going to happen with this, absolutely, and there will be haptics involved. So
Well, that goes back to teledildonics, doesn't it? Right? Like, it all goes back to the internet.
Yeah.
There were actually demos on the floor, also intermingled.
No, I didn't see any demos. No, and
Oculus is very PG, right?
They are. Yeah. But the indie developers, on the other hand, that's where the porn content will be coming out. I'm pretty sure you won't see it in the Oculus gallery, which is really you'll be selecting your experiences from within virtual reality. They have a storefront kind of a thing where you can pick what you want to look at while you're already in VR. I found that to be interesting. As you can tell, if I wasn't an evangelist for VR before, if you didn't notice it before, you're really going to notice it now. So watch out.
It definitely felt, to that point, it definitely felt like and I know both of you have kind of ridden this wave already at least once, right? When we were in that 2007, 2008.
2007, yeah. Is it
Yeah, when
2007?
virtual worlds were like so sexy to everybody, and you see that in it, that in VR proper, that's kind of what's going on right now.
Overinflated hype. I see it somewhat.
But it's tangible. I mean, the stuff does work. If you do these experiences, I've done many of them, and it's convincing. I mean, but it's in that regard, it's the same thing that you do have to try it. But I guess the hardware is going to be out there on Black Friday, and then Oculus will be there. They will be in the stores. People will pass, go to Costco, will see that thing on the shelf. They go like, what is that? So that's a big aspect of it, that distribution aspect. I was going to ask you guys about, because you mentioned, and let's just clarify. So you select in the Oculus arena, their store, you are in VR, and also you watch Netflix.
Granted, we were doing it in a solitary way, but that's sort of one of their collective passive things. So you definitely think like they're looking at people, watching a movie together or watching a game together, that kind of stuff, as in their eyes the ideal, social VR stuff, right? Netflix is available now, even if you have a Samsung Gear VR. Like, they didn't just like, hey, it's coming. Like, they basically developed it to a point where it was absolutely fully usable and then released it. So
right, we should be clear. We should be clear to the listener that we're talking now again about Samsung Gear VR specific applications that are available and will be available when the device comes on Black Friday. Now, what was really fascinating was when Michael Abresh from Oculus, and I don't know what his title is, Chief Scientist,
yeah.
He was talking about sort of the roadmap and the obstacles and the challenges to really sort of the goal that he set in his mind and for his research team. And he did mention that at some point, the goal is to have sort of stylish sunglasses, and he talked about all sorts of obstacles in bringing the virtual content in line with the physical content so that it's sort of indistinguishable. And it was absolutely fascinating. I mean, for me to kind of summarize this, it would be completely ridiculous. People can watch it on Twitch. But Michael Abresh also talked about the metaverse, not in this talk, but there is a blog post where he introduces himself on the Oculus website, The Path to the Metaverse. And he talks about Snow Crash. And I was going to ask you guys, because that connectedness of Second Life is still pretty darn awesome and unique, and it's not existent anywhere. So what is your sense where this is going? Is that idea abandoned? Or where are we with the idea of this interconnectedness in the Snow Crash sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a different variant of it, right? And even in, I kind of it's funny in some ways, John Carmack, right, who's their CTO, right, and going back to him, he was very accessible throughout the entirety of the conference. Like, he was wandering around, and you could very easily get into, developers would walk up and get into deep conversations with him about all kinds of things. And I kind of was there for a couple of those sort of deep, intense hallway conversations. And the topic of, sort of things like the metaverse came up. I mean, for he himself, he is much more of a big Minecraft fan, right? Which Minecraft is actually coming to Oculus and Gear VR as well. And for somebody like him, and I think maybe because he is such a big game player, his paradigm kind of focuses a little bit more about, I want a game to play in my experience, in my space, right? That he sees Minecraft more as a gateway to the metaverse, right? Still where it's interconnected, user-generated content, created spaces, but with gameplay added to it, right? And so from the way he was talking, you could see that that's kind of his thing. And he went into it, and it's funny, I filmed it, so I have it up on YouTube, if anybody wants to look at that part of the conversation, because he started to talk about these sort of things. And I directly questioned him, like, so are we talking about, so now you're starting to talk about kind of a metaverse like thing, right? And, and he kind of got a bit deeper in that. And, that they wanted, that Oculus, he kind of was sort of, I think, talking a bit free form in a way that Oculus at one point thought about having like a metaverse team, and that kind of had gotten pushed aside because the idea of like what the metaverse is different to varying people. So, but there still seems to be there's people on that's in the company that I think about these things, but I don't necessarily think that they're exactly aligning.
They're not leading with it. They're leading with a much more defined user experience, because a lot of people, I think the public can't wrap their heads around the idea of the metaverse at all. That's an extreme concept to try to understand, versus here's a really great game and look, you can pick up and throw things with your hands. So yeah.
Sorry, I suffer from broken record disease. The listeners do know that. I'm, of course, completely horrified of the idea that Facebook will win the metaverse wars and we all will live in Phase Land, or Second Phase, for that matter, where it's tightly controlled and our quote-unquote real names are hovering over our heads and all that kind of stuff. That stuff scares me.
I have the faith in the indie community to prevent that from happening.
Thank you, Luann. Your words in God's ear. Please. Indie community.
Yeah. I think where you're going to see them permeating a lot of their media in a more direct way is like, obviously, like Facebook is rolling out, like back to now kind of pushing to the 360 video stuff. They're going to be rolling out more of that, panoramic immersive content in the feed, right? And that's where they're going to start to push content.
Yeah, but it's a walled garden. I'm talking about the walled garden. People complain in Second Life is a walled garden. Yeah, it might be, but it's minuscule to the power of convincing people. The power that Facebook has to convince people that it's super cool to live in a walled garden. That scares me.
The days of AOL, right?
Backwards.
I agree. And in those
internet.org. I mean, let's save that for another show. But there is a power of a handful of companies to kind of divide up the internet amongst themselves with the connectivity, and it's paper or plastic at the checkout.
It's interesting, and that Facebook is actively working to bring internet accessibility to marginalized populations as well, the refugee camps, for instance.
And that is commendable with the internet.org, but the flip side of it is exactly it's the motive, and also then they control the content. Even if the motives were all really fabulous,
altruistic,
it is a small selection. It's the Reader's Digest version of the internet. I don't want to live in that world.
I'm having faith that Facebook can't possibly win, because people don't want that kind of control. And here we are talking about your fears and concerns again.
Yeah, if Google wins, it's the equal thing. But this is a bigger conversation. I want to talk about, in closing, you mentioned the Women in VR group, and they were actually meeting at Linden Lab as well, and I have them scheduled for the podcast in a couple of weeks. So, but you guys are part of this group. What did they offer around this Oculus Connect conference? What did you guys talk about?
So first off, I mean, there's several, kind of interest groups that deal with women who are working in virtual reality, right? So the Women in VR is just one of those. There's also like the VR girls, which were there, and then there are lots of folks, I think, at some of those larger meetup chapters, like in the Silicon Valley VR and the San Francisco VR and the LA VR, who happen to be women, who are also often thrown onto these Women in VR panels. I mean, ultimately, it's just the same as men working in these content. It's just, I think there's justly so, there's been some kind of focus on making sure to get women in the conversation and in presentations and in that. So to that point, Oculus seemed to be also making a concerted effort to make sure that there were a lot more women there. At other events, sort of more independent events like the SVVR conferences and things like that, the percentage of women has been kind of a bit notoriously low. But Facebook was, kind enough and has the power enough to be able to subsidize or decide who can come in, right? So, they reached out to a lot of, female coder groups and, women in technology and women in VR groups to try to get folks in. So there was noticeably a lot more women than there might be at a technology conference,
Yeah, our admission was free through Women in VR, and I think they provided that to a number of women's groups to encourage more women to attend. And there were more women there than I expected to see,
Yeah.
even not just within our Women in VR group that we're a part of, but many women were there. Still, it was this. I mean, what would you say, Joyce? 5%, maybe?
Yeah, still probably. I mean, from everything. I mean, a good portion. Luann mentioned we mentioned those couple extra events that they had a diversity luncheon, basically, where sort of a good portion of the women, and then also some other other kind of like non-white, non-male, paradigm of people, were invited to, and I don't know, maybe there were 150. 200 people, maybe. I mean, obviously 100, maybe there. I mean, obviously, the bigger question is when women in VR talk about the same thing that men in VR talk about, right? It's, we're all kind of interested in the broader things, but, in the diversity, luncheon, they kind of even had put together a little kind of card of like conversation starters for women. And I've got that in front of me.
We never did have the conversation there in the
No,
luncheon,
no.
which I thought was kind of interesting. They gave us talking points, questions, conversation starters, and then we had no conversation. But they gave us moleskines. That was the funny thing. Our
Yeah.
swag from that diversity luncheon was very low tech. It was a moleskine and an Oculus pen.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I mean, at least it wasn't I was going to make a sexist joke, like
leave that on the
an
table.
ironing board or something.
No.
So yeah. So I mean, some of those questions are, growing an inclusive and welcoming culture, showing how exciting tech can be through VR. And here's the one what Luann addressed. Prohibitive costs of VR setup and education. Right. Overcoming the perception that VR is not for me. Creating scalable tools to address hate in virtual worlds, which that's an interesting thing. I hope, and I did, that did come up at least at the table when I was chatting at that luncheon, the idea that, gaming culture can sometimes some parts of it can be sometimes misogynistic, right? So hopefully VR does not go down those routes. And so it was a, kind of a list of questions in that regard that they gave. I mean, I think, the general questions, there was a lot of enthusiasm, I think. It was great to sort of see other women there, because I mean that's hard even at a lot of the social media and technology conferences that often women aren't necessarily represent equally either. So
however, some of the pioneers of VR, many of them were women, and that is not well known, decades ago. And I talked with Jackie Morey. And
yeah, we had her on last week. Yeah.
I talked with Jackie Morey about maybe doing a video series, trying to interview some of these pioneers, women in VR, before they're gone, to get some sort of living history out there, so that people recognize them as when VR becomes the thing, they still can look back and say, "Oh yes," and look at these women pioneers. So.
And Jackie is actually even writing a book kind of on VR history. So
she made a scent collar She made a scent collar.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
actually,
yeah.
who was it? Michael Abrash was talking about the scent being difficult, that it has to waft. It can't just be there all the time. Isn't that what he was saying? And so they're looking at, there are a lot of things behind the curtain that we don't even know are coming to support VR experiences. But it was interesting. I talked to Jackie after that talk about the scent, and she said, she had talked with him about scent before personally.
Yeah. People really need to watch that portion. Michael Abrash talking about the research that they're doing. It is really fascinating. And again, people can draw their conclusions about if it's hopeful and going to help the world, or is it going to further destroy it. But I would say it's up to us. As the UPS guy in my town always said, when I shipped an Oculus back and forth, because we only had one, shipped it back and forth from East Coast to West Coast, and I asked him, you know what that is? He goes, no. And I said, well, that's a virtual reality goggles. You put them on, and then you're in a different world. And I explained it to him a little bit. And you know what he said? He said, it's pretty cool. You can do really cool stuff with it, and you can do really kind of screwed up things with it. And I said, yeah, you're exactly right. And then he said, well, given the track record of humanity, which is not that good, we're going to screw it up.
I mean, I don't know. I'm on the same. I think direction as you. I'm much more interested in the for good.
Okay, I gotta wrap it up real quick. I mean, nobody talked about Second Life at that conference, I suppose.
Oh, wait, I did. I one guy sitting on the floor talking to his buddies. I heard the word Second Life and I tuned in to eavesdrop a little bit. And he was talking about how he has such mad skills in 3D modeling that he can make a ton of money making one-offs for people in Second Life and charging them way more than he should, and gets away with it because.
Whoa, did you get his name? We gotta track that guy down and report him. We gotta abuse report him right now.
Because
Yeah.
if you're really good at those tools, you can work very quickly compared to the rest of us who struggle. So something that took him 15 minutes to make, or 10 minutes, or a small amount of time, the consumer has no idea what the cost is of that. What's a fair price?
He, as a basically very skilled Second Life overcharging person, was giving advice to the new VR company. Like, yeah, you can screw people. I've been doing it in Second Life for over a decade.
That's right, which really disturbed me as an educator looking for content creators and help creating experiences in VR, because I thought, boy, I'm going to have to just figure this out before I start shopping. What is it? What's a fair value for those kinds of services? Who knows?
This is another possible replay of what happened, Joyce, in the beginning of the hype in Second Life, where people overcharged businesses. And you remember there was something in the UK, some members of parliament there, they charged hundreds of thousands of pounds for Second Life things that were just a sim or two sims in development. 100,000 pounds, something like that. I got to look that up. But
no, I think there definitely was the what's a fair going rate for designing and developing stuff for folks, which was, you got pretty out of control in some places. And then I think the other big thing that was a kind of a thorn in the side to sort of on the downswing of the popularity of certain serious businesses looking at Second Life was like them misunderstanding the medium and kind of coming in like, it's the 3D web, but I'm just going to put it up and people will come to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine in that second point, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to dive in and for similar reasons and make bad mistakes, thinking VR, just like virtual reality, could make some change. And I'm also seeing a lot of folks start talking about these, we're the first again, which is kind of funny. It's those so irk me. There's I just saw an announcement for a company that is working with, I don't know, for CNN or working with one of the news organizations. They're going to do a VR. They're going to have a VR stream of the Democratic debate.
Ooh, I remember when Obama had a headquarters in Second Life.
I know.
Hillary Clinton and everybody.
And when Reuters had a division in Second Life.
I hadn't really thought of that, but the release of all this stuff is converging with the election, the presidential election. You're right. We'll see more of that. Oh, yeah.
The circus is complete.
A lot of people don't kind of look back at the context of what came before them, right? Like, these are all related mediums, and
Wait a minute, Joyce. You're surprised by the lack of ability to contextualize history among the populace with the education system that we have? Come on.
Hey, I forgot. I actually did see a Bernie Sanders rally in 360 video up on YouTube somewhere. It's already happening.
Somebody tell CNN or whoever it is that's doing the Democratic debate they're not the first.
What? We're not the first?
What?
And that was Joyce Betancourt and Lou Ann Phillips. More information about Oculus Connect and all links, and especially Michael Aber's talk on his research of full immersion, full presence, where the road is leading him and his team. All right, so that's it. You know where to get the Second Life related news. In many places, have fun watching the Democratic debate in VR. I'm going to be watching it in Second Life. That's it. Thanks for listening, and bye.
The Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show is supported by Maven Homes, Giza Creations, Botanical, Strawberry Sing, Abranimations, Eros Avatars, Caravel Design, Humanoid Animations, Avacon, The Cube Republic, Fateware by Damien Fate, The Avazines Publication Family, What Next, Bright Canopy, Duchy Furniture, Landscapes Unlimited, Dwarfins, The Den, Following Gods Incorporated, Feroce SL, Kona Stream, and Death Row Designs. Contact the show via Skype, DraxFiles, Avatar DraxFiles, or email radio@draxfiles.com.